your house at the moment that are really, really important to you, but not necessarily anyone else? Now I'm going to say, I'm your social worker, I'm the police officer, I'm the nurse. Get rid of one of them and think how that feels. Because you've developed years of attachment to it. And actually, what you're doing is saying, I've got more power and control than you. You're still insignificant. You're still in that lost place, and I'm better. And therefore, I'm going to tell you what to do. And in my mind, that never works. And all that does is fuel that feeling of powerlessness and loss. So if you're looking at hoarding characteristics, by removing things too early, by making somebody do something that they're not ready to do, you're just perpetuating all of those feelings over and over again. Around about the same time, I remember when I first got a flat, I wasn't able to pay the bills very well, and the bills were coming in through the door. I don't know if you have this feeling, but it was like, I can't open them, I can't look at them, and they're coming more and more and more. And the more that came in, and the more people said, Deb, you've got to open them, at least you've got to deal with them, the more overwhelmed I felt, and the less able to do it. And if you imagine somebody who hoards and has collected things that they've attached themselves to for a long, long time, and then you're saying, let's get rid of this, that overwhelming feeling can just be absolutely a barrier. So one of the first things in working with somebody who self-neglects or hoards is just don't start setting your targets. Get them to set what they want, and don't even talk about it in the very beginning. Talk about something else, something unrelated, so that you can develop that relationship. Can you imagine the day when your house is a real tip? You know what it feels like when somebody knocks on the door and you think, I'm not letting you in, you're not getting in here. And then you think, oh God, I'm going to have to let them in. And you start kind of making apologies for all of the things on the way. And then somebody started pointing that out, or sitting on the edge of the seat and frowning at you. You would think, hey, who do you think you are? Wouldn't let them through the door again, would you? But if somebody sat and talked about how you're feeling and what was going on for you and your day, what your life was like, you might actually feel they're interested in me rather than just clearing this mess up to do something because they're a housing worker or a social worker. So I think thinking about people's experiences, life histories, why it happened, is a really much more engaging point than actually trying to do something from the very beginning, because we're all very busy. We've already talked about what self-neglect and hoarding is, but I think it's probably worth saying that most of us will self-neglect at some point. You've finished a relationship, you feel down, you don't want to get out of bed, you collect things. I'm a hoarder of books as well as quotes. I'm not doing too well here, am I? So, in terms of safeguarding, we've talked a little bit today about the 3 different responses. So we have 3 different responses when it comes into safeguarding. We have information and advice, outcomes. So I could say, you housing worker, I want you to have a multi-agency meeting. Or it could come into safeguarding and we could have a strategy meeting. Now, my problem is that at the point of somebody disclosing that they hoard, we have some reason to suspect that something is going wrong in their life, but we don't know what. So we must take that into safeguarding so that we can first establish, hang on, are they being coerced or harassed? Is there antisocial behaviour here? Is there domestic abuse here? Is there anybody else, children, other adults being affected by this? So if you take that into a Section 42 inquiry and make the initial inquiry, then we can deal with all of that to rule it out. And then after that, we look at how we work in a person-centred manner with the person, but we have to rule those risks out first. And I just want to show you a little bit about my thoughts on that. Step 1 is really easy. And these are key through everything that we do. Step 1 is, are there any risks to other people? Okay? And by that I mean, are there fire risks? Are there environmental health risks? Are there aggressive persons? What are the risks to others? Where there are risks to others, we have a legal obligation to share information to protect others. Okay? Step 2, is there a potential crime here? So where we're talking about potential crime, could somebody else be harming the individual or be potentially a carer that's neglecting the person? Or could that person be subject to antisocial behaviour? I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was a person who lived at the end of the street and they had the sofa in the garden, rubbish bags piled high, dirty net curtains, and all of the kids were wicked with them. They would run in and out of the garden, they would knock on the door, they would taunt them. Terrible. And that's something else that we need to consider in terms of crime. Now, Section 115 of the Crime and Disorder Act says that where there's reasonable suspicion of a crime, then we should report that. So we need to consider that. The next bit is it in the public interest to share the information? So if it's in the public interest to share the information because, for example, there's rats and vermin that could affect other people, the fire risk could affect somebody else or there's a dangerous person there, then Data Protection Act, Caldecott, also we can share that information. The next thing to consider is, could this person have been coerced or controlled in making this decision? This year, Section 76 of the Serious Crime Act came out, and actually what it looks at is people being coerced into making decisions so that they don't have a choice in that decision. Now that could be domestic abuse, or it could be somebody using the property. When I worked in substance misuse services, quite often there would be a number of people come into that property and sit with the person, use their facilities, drink with them, and actually coerce them into making certain decisions. The next thing to consider after that is, could the person have mental health problems that requires an assessment under the Mental Health Act? Because if they're so unwell that they can't make decisions for themselves, then we have a duty to assess their mental health needs and look at that. Now, once we've ruled all of that out, then we must share that information to explore those things with the local authority. But once it comes into the local authority, we don't do something nasty to the person. We make sure that that person is happy, that they have their decisions. So we look at support, advocacy, we look at person-centred assessment. What a person says makes them feel safe. Okay, does that make sense? Mental Capacity Act assessments. So, can you tell me, I've done that little bit and I'll do the last bit last. Can you tell me, if you are feeling down and depressed, who's the first person that you ring? Your mum, brother, sister, friend, best mate? I'm sure the first person that you ring isn't some social worker or some formal service. You go through lots of support mechanisms, and in safeguarding, quite often, what we think is, oh, that person's feeling down, they're having a tough time, they're self-neglecting, let's just get another service in. When actually, possibly, all the person wants is a real engagement with somebody else who maybe understands. I don't know if anybody saw it, but there's a Britain's Worst Hoarder. Don't know if you saw that, yeah?
He had to slide through his front door.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And actually, there was all these professionals in and out all the time. And the one person who helped him was the gardener, because the gardener had a genuine interest in him. He found him funny, he had a good sense of humour. So if we're working in services, it doesn't have to be us that does it. We can find somebody to meet that need, and we can write that on our assessments and care plans as a way of meeting need to demonstrate that defensible decision making. Defensible decision making is really, really important. Now, steps 1, 2 and 3. So that was risk to others, potential crime and public interest. That's about protecting people out there, okay? Steps 4 and 5, coercive and controlling behaviour and mental health, is about protecting those people who can't protect themselves. The rest of the steps, 6, 7, 8 and 9, are all about protecting people's rights to make decisions, including unwise decisions. And step 10 is about protecting ourselves by recording appropriately. Okay, does that make sense?